Award-winning Zimbabwean journalist Hopewell Chin'ono has spent a night in jail after he was arrested with public violence. He's constantly been vocal on alleged government corruption, including the questionable acquisition of coronavirus supplies. He was arrested with opposition politician Jacob Ngaruvume. Zimbabwean authorities are notorious for harassing journalists who report on matters that put the government in bad light. Now, joining me to expand on this is Chris Maroleng, Executive Director at Good Governance Africa. Chris, very good morning to you and thank you for your time. Hopewell Chin'ono is one of the few journalists who has constantly and perhaps consistently ensured the story of police brutality in Zimbabwe is told. Corruption is exposed. I mean, we know that he's told stories of the abuses of the late MDC leader Morgan Tsvangirai and so forth. And now he's become a target by the look of things. The government has been eyeing him for some time. What was the last straw?
Yeah, absolutely, and good morning to you, Mpo. Hopewell Chin'ono has been a stalwart of investigative journalism and general coverage of affairs relating to Zimbabwe for close to 2 decades in that country. And certainly since I started doing work, indeed even coverage of Zimbabwe, I worked very closely with Hopewell Chin'ono, and I can say that in all of the things and stories that we covered, he carried himself out with the greatest amount of integrity and dignity. And it's very sad today to find that Hopewell Chin'ono has been arrested really because he has been doing his job, which is to bring us the latest news and information on Zimbabwe. And he was in the process of unveiling deep levels of corruption in relation to the supply of COVID-19 equipment and protective equipment that was being provided by the government of Zimbabwe to its people. And this malfeasance by the government has really resulted in him, unfortunately, now being arrested and detained. As of yesterday, we understand that he was in a detention at Harare Central Police Station, where his lawyers were able to make contact with him.
Now, just last month, Hopewell Chin'ono said that he feared for his life after the ruling ZANU-PF party spokesperson accused him of trying to embarrass the president, as you speak, by linking him to the president's family, to alleged corruption relating to the COVID-19 related contracts. In terms of the charges that Chin'ono stands of, what do we know about those?
Well, we understand that he has been really charged on spurious charges of inciting people to violence. Effectively, the government is arguing that Hopewell Chin'ono, through his utterances of really exposing this corruption, but more importantly, also inviting people to participate in lawful protest action, which is planned for the 31st of July, that he was acting in a manner that incited people towards violence. This has not been proven because, as you know, this event has not occurred. There has been no violence that Mr. Chin'ono has been part of, but more importantly, that these protest actions, the planned protest actions, are said to occur in a very peaceful manner. So it's unfortunate that these steps have been taken, but not surprising, as this seems to be the stock in trade of the government of Zimbabwe, who from time to time do lock up, intimidate, harass, even abduct opponents of the state in that country. So certainly, if you want to understand more about this, we at Good Governance Africa have shined a spotlight on this before the 31st of July protest, which shall be occurring in Zimbabwe against corruption, to basically show this through our editorial processes. We are currently in the midst of an editorial coverage of what will be going on in Zimbabwe. So we invite all people who are watching today, if you're interested in Zimbabwe, to really log on to our website. That is www.ggA.org, where you can find out more about what's going on there.
Yeah, and you know, it's quite telling because in the recent months we've seen journalists, doctors, nurses and so forth being among the hundreds who've been striking and protesting, striking for better pay and being arrested for it. Surely this is a worrying trend against free speech in Zimbabwe.
Well, certainly as the political tensions increase in Zimbabwe, what we have seen by this administration led by President Emerson Mnangagwa has been a narrowing of democratic space. That has been to say that people who protest about the living conditions, about the political situation, the economic and social situation in Zimbabwe that has declined since the entrance of Emerson Mnangagwa's government, they have found themselves being targeted, not just as protesters, but as enemies of the state. We've seen increasing number of arrests of political activists, including political opposition activists. And this has been a worrying feature, not just of this administration under President Emerson Mnangagwa, but certainly a feature under the ZANU-PF administration for decades, more than 3 decades since the ascendancy earlier on of President Robert Mugabe, who was subsequently removed in a coup by the military in that country and replaced by Emerson Mnangagwa. So having said this, what we are really calling for in Zimbabwe is for that administration to respect the rule of law, to respect human rights and the civil liberties of their people, and to make it right with people like Hopewell Chin'ono, who have been unwarrantedly detained and put in prison for simply doing their job, which is highlighting the rotten corruption that we're increasingly seeing in that country.
Chris, as you speak about the narrowing of the democratic space under Mnangagwa's rule, we know that for the longest time the focus was on iron-fisted President Robert Mugabe's leadership, but the problem of political intimidation seems to be escalating. When assessing the entire situation and looking at the rule under ZANU-PF, where are the holes that are leading to a continuation of the same old?
So what we have noted at Good Governance Africa is the fact that there is a structural deficit in democratic practice in Zimbabwe, and this goes beyond Emerson Mnangagwa to, as you correctly point out, to periods during the Robert Mugabe administration. And this is due to really weak institutions in that country, weak legislative institutions who do not play a proper oversight role on the executive. Those in the executive, like the state security apparatus, seem to operate with impunity in that country without fear or deference to any authority, and certainly lack of respect of the general civil liberties of the people of that country. That is why we have seen so many people in that country voting with their feet, because the electoral environment in Zimbabwe has been marred with instances of illegitimate outcomes, if we can put it that way, that have really called into question whether ZANU-PF, as the governing party in that country, is really dedicated to democratic practice and indeed the upholding of civil liberties in that country.
It's certainly an interesting story, this, as we look to Hopewell Chin'ono and try and find out what will happen to him in the end. And looking at the case, which has now become a legal case, what are the outcomes or perhaps the next move that are expected in this matter?
Well, typically what happens is that the accused, being Hopewell Chin'ono and others in this case, are expected to appear before the courts, really to be formally charged. As of last night, what we understood from Hopewell Chin'ono's lawyer, Beatrice Mutetwa, and others of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Lawyers Association, was that no formal charges had been indicated to Mr. Chinono, really indicating to us again that this is just an attempt to harass and place an unfair cost on those who highlight the malfeasance of the government in that country. And I think it's incumbent on all democratic, loving citizens of Zimbabwe, but certainly within the region, even us here in South Africa, to call upon the government of that country to release Hopewell Chin'ono and others who have been detained on false pretenses, who are simply trying to highlight the bad governance that is occurring in that country. We have said over and over again at Good Governance Africa that one of the key ways that will bring about better livelihoods, better living standards for the people of Zimbabwe and many other Southern African countries is if our governments respect the rule of law, engage in effective governance in line with sound democratic practices, and support institutions that are put in place really to support the interests of the people of that country and certainly within our region.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Executive Director at Good Governance Africa, Chris Maroleng, speaking about the case of award-winning Zimbabwean journalist Hopewell Chin'ono, who spent a night behind bars.